every single episode is going to be live.
Every town has a ghost story that's been passed down throughout the generations. But what if those legends are true? My job is to travel to these destinations, explore them, and figure out the mystery that lies within.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday night. Hope everyone is doing well. It is the final episode of Behind the Screams for season 8. And like I said last night when we did our season finale, thank you all so much that have tuned in throughout the entire season, as well as some of the new folks that have tuned in here at the end. Welcome. I definitely appreciate you guys. It's hard to believe it's already here, already over. We started at the end of September, actually, the last weekend in September, and did an episode also every Tuesday night all through the month of October. And then we did end up having to push the episode to last night because of the weather, since it was an outside episode. But here we are. So I want to say hello to everyone that's over here in the chat room. We've got Mr. Bob Burnell on here. Thank you so much for joining us and always being here and always being supportive. We've got Miss Sonia Thompson from The Walking Dead and Miss Nancy Weems checking in. Good evening to you, ma'am. We have Miss Angela Brinson. Always good to see you. And met Angela there at Goblin Con. Hopefully, I think maybe next week we're probably going to do an episode talking about Goblin Con. We've sort of put that on hold because we've had all the things going on since then, and I haven't really been able to touch on that with the busy season there at the jail as well as here. But it was great meeting Angela there. And we've got Michael Greer. Good evening to you. And other folks in here that we can see on here, but we can't see who you are. Hello, and thank you for tuning in. I do have some new folks that have joined the page from this past week's episode of Central Massachusetts Paranormal Society. I was a guest on their show this past Saturday. And that was so much fun. I got to be a guest of Miss Lady Victoria. And so we've got a link to that episode where we talked, it was on November 1st. The link to that is on the Ghost Biker page. And so for anyone that watched that episode and that is tuning in here, welcome to the page. Thank you so much for joining us. And then we have Mona James. Hello. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Bob says he knows what it's like to be in jail now. Yes. I still have friends who are giving me a hard time after banning Bob this season. That was a first. That was a first for me. So we banned Bob on the episode, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, there from the funeral home. And so I apologize for that, Bob. Now, so anyways, like I said, we've had a great season so far. Season 8 was Ghost Biker Infinity. And with that, we highlighted different episodes or different locations that follow along the life cycle. And so I know you guys have heard me say this every episode, but I do like to recap on the first episode of season 8. We went to Haunted Harriman Hospital, where we investigated the hospital. It was myself and my business partner and dear friend, Dr. Christy Sumner. And so we spent the night there in Harriman. and investigated that location. That was a first for me, being in there since it's been turned into a paranormal destination. I've been in there whenever it was an actual hospital. It's been a very, very long time ago. I was in there, but Ronnie D did a great job, as well as his volunteers and team leads. They run a great location down there in Harriman. We had some very interesting experiences, lots and lots of disembodied voices, even saw a shadow figure. Did catch some movement. And then also when we were reviewing the episode, we did catch a shadow figure on the episode. A lot of you sent me the timestamps for that. And then for the second episode, we traveled down to Cleveland, Tennessee, to a never before investigated location, Cleveland Metal Foundry. That was a wild place and a wild investigation. My friend Tiffany White, she traveled with me on that one. And I love investigating with Tiffany, especially some of these never before darker type locations. And it was a first for me on that as well. Actually, hearing what we are still unsure as to whether it was a paranormal scream, or if it was an intruder, or if it was somebody trying to fake and scare us. Not really sure, but we're still actually analyzing that, as well as watching video. Had a great behind the screens where we broke that down. And with that one, we were investigating a workplace. Workplaces are definitely something that is the greater part of our lives here, and where we spend a lot of our time. So investigating that to see if we get any activity related to the workplace. And then as far as the third episode, we traveled to an undisclosed home in East Tennessee. It was a family home of mine. Wanted to see if there was a familial connection. The activity that we got there was definitely low key in comparison to the location before, but we did have some activity that I do have that I was able to trace it back to connections that I have with my family, as well as possibly activity from the family who originated built the house there. Let's see. And then for the fourth episode, we did another location in East Tennessee that was a former church and funeral home. And on our last Behind the Screams, we broke that evidence down, showed some never before seen footage that we captured on prior investigations. This location was a church from 1950 up until 2007, and then it was turned into a funeral home, and then and then operated as a funeral home until about 5 or 6 years ago. So that's kind of breaking down the season. If you haven't seen those episodes, we hope you go back and check them out. We on each of the Behind the Screams this season, we did show evidence that was captured either on earlier investigations or that were captured while we were not doing the live. So yeah, go back, check those out. And again, appreciate everyone who has watched. Last night's episode. So last night's episode, we ended up the season finale with a investigation of a cemetery. And so I like doing cemeteries. I actually started investigating when I was younger in different cemeteries, spending time in there, either doing research, genealogy research with my grandpa, or just investigating to see if we got any type of activity, any recordings, any type of video, photography. Cemeteries, I feel, are very unique. Some people, in talking to them, I've gotten some feedback from people that maybe don't have a lot of luck investigating cemeteries. And then other people I've spoke with have got a lot of activity when they go into these different cemeteries or graveyards. It really just depends. I like doing it. I've always gotten some interesting activity. I don't believe necessarily that the spirits just hang out with the bodies there in the cemeteries. I believe that a lot of it is related to the energy that is deposited within a cemetery. Let's see, looking over here, more people checking in tonight. Hello. Thank you so much for tuning in there. But yes, I believe that it's the energy that's deposited within the cemetery or the graveyard. If you think about it, there's so much emotions that goes into these locations. Loved ones who are lost, people who are visiting the graves, maybe are people who are family. That's maybe one of the last times you'll see them, or maybe one of the few times that you'll see these family members whenever they're visiting a loved one's grave. It's typically not happy emotion that's spent there, but sometimes it is in reminiscing and thinking about those loved ones that are lost. So there's just I believe, a lot of energy that is deposited there within inside of the cemetery. And so we had to postpone that last episode and do it last night because the last Tuesday night in October, it was a very wet, rainy day. And so because of the equipment and because of using dowsing rods and because of the landscape there at the cemetery, it was best to put that off so it didn't damage equipment, as well as so that we didn't have to worry about it raining and messing up the dowsing rod experiment and such. So we put it off till this past week. It was also a lot warmer. And so I thought about it and thought, you know what, I'm going to put it off just an extra night and do it during the beaver moon. I thought that was fitting because spiritually, as I said last night, there's a lot of spiritual meaning surrounding the beaver moon. And so if you're into looking up or if you're into the moon signs and such, you probably already know this, but basically it's centered around preparation and grounding and definitely a time of reflection. We're here it's not quite the end of the year. It's definitely not the beginning of the year. It's kind of like this in-between phase. And symbolically, it encourages you to prepare for the upcoming new year as well as the upcoming winter. It would be the time whenever the beavers finished their building their dams and sealing everything up. So it's really a time of reflecting on what you've built over the year, as well as releasing everything before the new cycle begins. So I felt like it was a perfect time and very symbolic of the ending of the season. And so I thought that would be a perfect time to end that. Plus, if you've watched any of my past older episodes, you may remember that I always take note of what the moon phase is, as well as the temperature, the atmospheric conditions. We like to take note of that before the investigations, just to see if possibly any of that makes a difference when it comes to doing the investigation. So again, there was a little bit of symbolism with doing that and with waiting to do that in the next episode. So we had that going on. It was a very clear night. It was also the night of apparently, I didn't know this when we were planning it, but apparently it was a night when there was a meteor shower that was supposed to be taking place. And so if you watched the episode, we did see a meteor right there from the top of the cemetery. I don't think my camera was panned just right for you all to see it during the episode, during the live, but both Christy and I saw it, and I think that actually kind of played into some of the activity that we were having. So let's see, what else did we have going on there. I do want to pull up, give me 1 second here. I do want to pull up some video of the cemetery during the day. So I did not disclose the specific cemetery that we were in investigating for multiple reasons. One, out of respect for the cemetery itself, and then also because, you know, I don't know that it really mattered specifically when we were doing the investigations. You know, you have some different graveyards or cemeteries that have local legends surrounding them that, you know, sometimes play into the type of activity. Really, for myself, I just wanted to see, I wanted to pick a kind of a unique cemetery, as well as one that really didn't have any type of local legend or lore surrounding it, just to see if there's activity inside of this location based on just the fact of the consecrated ground, or just the fact of the location of where it was at, not so much the story surrounding anyone specifically that's located inside this, inside the grounds. And so we were here in East Tennessee. The cemetery itself was located up on top of a mountain, and there were approximately 175 graves inside of this area. Some marked, some a lot unmarked, and then a lot that had stones that were so old you couldn't read any of the inscriptions on them. So I do want to pull up video here. Give me 1 second. I want to pull up a video that shows a walkthrough. I stopped by there this evening, and here we go. Stopped by there this evening and took some video. And I think it's important to note, so I'm going to show you where we were standing and just kind of talk through it here. There we go. Just kind of talk through it as we're walking. Let's see, that's actually the second video, but we'll go ahead and show this one. So as you can see on this was kind of the area we were standing in. So there's a lot of filled stones. The earliest stone that was in there was, and it's kind of hard to say what the first stone was, but looking at the records and the research on it, the earliest was believed to be around, that they were actually able to find a date on, was 1837. Obviously, some of these others harder to note because they were just simple field stones. There were some that were marked, kind of staying away from actually showing some of the the names on the stones. They were turned in multiple directions. So your traditional Christian cemetery is going to have the heads facing toward the west and the feet facing toward the east. This one, they were turned in both directions. And that may just simply be because at one point in time, this would have been a family cemetery. And at another point in time, this would have been a community cemetery. So let me pull up that first video there. Again, that was the second one. Here we go. Okay, so it was really interesting how it was set up, because this area that I'm walking in right here is completely open until you really start looking. And you'll see just sort of clusters of graves in various areas on top of the mountain there. These are very unique stones for the area. This cemetery here has the highest concentration of these crook-necked stones. these are this cemetery. There are a few other cemeteries here in the county that have those, but not the highest, or this one has the highest concentration. And so if you saw just there, I'm actually going to back that up briefly. If you saw right here where these stones are, so we were actually standing in front of this little cluster of stones. The tripwire last night, I had that running in between these 4 stones, and then running across where you can see the field stones right here. I do have a cemetery roster of this one, and there are, because of an incident that happened at one point in time when they were cleaning up the cemetery, there are a lot of these stones, not so much the crook-necked ones, but you can see a pile of field stones right there. Quite a few stones have been misplaced. When they were cutting down trees, it did knock some of these stones, did kind of knock them out of place, and when they were put back, they weren't necessarily put back in the right place. So I'm going to come back up here during the daylight hours, or when the time changes and it's light later at night, and do some walking and show you guys how to locate some of these unmarked graves using the dowsing rods. That's one of the things that I teach you about over at Rugby and hold workshops on. And so I'm going to do that up here. This other area right here, this little cluster of stones, this was where we had one of the flashlights over in the far corner. And as you can see, the road that goes around the cemetery here. But we did have a flashlight in this little cluster of stones. So you can see kind of how far away this area was from where we were standing. I think I pan back here in a few minutes. We'll just kind of it's one of my favorite cemeteries, actually. You can see there is a soldier's grave over here. Yeah. So, and then over here to the right hand side where we're walking, those 4 stones, those were 4 stones to the right. Those were where the infants were sitting last night. So again, it kind of gives you a little bit of orientation to where we had the cat balls, the tripwire, and then to the right of where we're at. Okay, yeah. So here's those 4 stones. Way back over there in between those trees was where we had the flashlight that lit up when we were talking about the military soldier. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of orientation on the cemetery itself during the daylight, to kind of give you a little bit of idea of how we were placed. Now, a lot of people have said, whenever we were doing the live last night, have said, oh, you need ambient lighting, you need some of that. We were trying not to draw attention to ourselves. We were up there in the cemetery, again, out of respect, not trying to draw any attention to what we were doing, as well as I typically don't like to do lives or showcase in my videos complete dark, not showing the tools and not having ambient lighting, because I feel like you can't always see shadows and such when you're doing that. But this was a special circumstance, being that we were outside, we were in a public area. So, just didn't want to draw attention. So it was kind of hard for us to really show just how we were set up. I did not want to go over into the newer section. The newer section is a current cemetery where they are still active in there. So we kind of wanted to stay away from that area as well. Hello to Mr. Daryl Paulette with Clover Hill Village. Hey, better late than never. Glad to have you here. Let's see. Bob says, why are cemeteries located on a hill a lot of the time with old locations? That's a great question. For here, probably a lot of them are located on hills because we're in a very hilly area. I don't know specifically. For here, that's probably the case just because it is the terrain of the area. I've seen some really, really unique cemeteries that actually are staggered down a hill. I guess it could be very symbolic in some cases of, closer to God, closer to heaven. I'm sure there's definitely some symbolism in that. It could probably also be the area kind of pushing it to either having it in a spot centrally located there in town. I'll definitely have to look that up and see if there is some type of particular meaning. I know hospitals are always located in a certain, or used to, long time ago, in the old towns. Hospitals and jails were always located in certain areas in town for specific reasons. But for here, so this cemetery would have been, like I said, a community cemetery at one point in time. It would have also been a family cemetery as well. I know that this land is, if you look at it, it would have been inside of, I'm trying not to say the community that this is located in. At some other time, I probably will say the community, but for now, I'm just going to kind of not put that in there. But this community is it is not a incorporated town, but because the area is very rural in this particular county, they had these little townships, and because it's so rural, so mountainous, most people kind of stayed within each of these small mountain communities and married within the communities. Didn't typically go to the main centers of town or the big cities in the county. And I say big cities, kind of use that kind of loosely. They typically didn't go there unless they had to do business for whatever reason. But it was usually a day's horse ride to the main parts of town, or it was a train ride to the big cities within the county. So this would have actually been located almost in the center of this community where this was where this cemetery is located at. And I do want to add, there is a difference between cemeteries and graveyards. We mentioned that last night as well. Graveyards are always connected to a church or churchyard. Cemeteries are freestanding. So there is a church within less than a mile. It may be right at a mile from this cemetery. But in like a lot of small rural communities, you have lots and lots of cemeteries. I know there are a bunch of cemeteries within this county. And so it's not uncommon to have old farmsteads that have family cemeteries on them, as well as family cemeteries that essentially open up to the community and have or multifamily cemeteries just located out in the middle of nowhere in some of these areas. Now, you look at it now and say, well, this is kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But back whenever a lot of these community cemeteries were established, they were actually pretty decent sized towns because of either coal mining or because of timber mills or because of some larger industry. So while they may seem like they're kind of off in the middle of nowhere now, because these areas have essentially dispersed and spread out, at one point in time, they would have been pretty decent sized little communities. But that is a great question, Bob. Let's see. You will get that at times in Colorado because you get the Boot Hill type cemeteries at times up there. Yeah, I would believe that. And it's probably very similar in East Tennessee as to it would be there in Colorado, especially these mountainous states, mountainous regions of different states. Very good point. Let's see. And Laura says, I need to join that. I haven't used dowsing rods much. I love dowsing rods. I hate that we weren't able to really do a good dowsing rod session last night. We ended the live with a dowsing rod session. But sometime I'm going to show you guys what my phone screen looks like whenever we're doing these live investigations. Trying to moderate that. Probably what I'm going to do next season, or at least for any future lives, is I'm going to have somebody moderating the comments from a laptop at a different location. So I'm probably going to do that way. Because as I'm going through on the screen, I have my screen that I'm looking at. I have a little section for comments. And for some reason, StreamYard has a section where they want you to advertise for StreamYard. So it ends up being literally a little section about that big that I'm having to scroll and go in and pull that out there. So it makes it a little bit hard. But we were trying to do a dowsing rod session where we have you guys ask questions. That way it kind of takes that human element out as far as asking questions and trying to use the rods. So it was a little bit harder for Chris to hold the light as well as look at the comments and me use the rods. So, but I love using the rods. I love using them for asking directional questions, asking yes and no questions, finding water, finding unmarked graves, I have friends use them to find lost items. There's a whole lot you can use the rods for. You can also do the pendulum. Some people tend to identify more with the pendulum. For me, as I'm standing there, the rods have been something I've always used. And I do know that there are people who are up in that cemetery that has probably used those rods as well, because it would have been a common thing at this point in time. And the headstones, very, very cool, very unique headstones. I actually have a whole book that I bought just on those type of crook-necked headstones. At that time when I was researching here and researching the specific cemetery, I was looking here. I'm looking over my notes now when we were talking about it. At that time, when the cemetery was being established, mass-produced stones just really weren't available. A lot of the time you had to rely on someone in the community to hand make those stones. And since there are a lot of folks that would have been in there either prior to the Civil War, that's why a lot of the stones would have been either filled stones, and sometimes they would have been etched, sometimes they wouldn't, and a lot of the time they would have just been hand chiseled stones. So it seems like at that time that there was somebody in the area that was making those silhouette style headstones. And according to the book, it's a lot of those are either from the Scottish or Irish descent, and it was a common type stone that would have been in certain states. I believe Indiana was one of them, Pennsylvania, and then certain areas of Virginia had some of the stones that were that shape. So let's see. So they're definitely unique, and I'll do another Ghost Biker Garage either when the weather warms up or when we have some when it gets lighter later. Maybe sometime maybe in April we'll do another episode from there. Let's see. Bob says, you mentioned sanctified ground with the cemetery. Does that mean that the ground is blessed before someone is buried? I thought that sanctified ground was only at a church. No, it just depends, Bob. A lot of cemeteries. Now, this isn't always the case when it comes to like the family cemeteries, but like take Rugby, for instance, that I had just mentioned. So Laurel Dale Cemetery, that cemetery itself was created back in the first burials there took place in August of 1881. Now, Rugby was established in 1880, at the end of 1880, October to be exact, and they had the first burials in there in the summer of 1881. And the reason that was because of typhoid fever. And so they needed to have a place to bury those dead that did die tragically of typhoid. And so the land was donated there in the town from the Board of Aid to Land Ownership. And they didn't want to have it right there in the center of town. They didn't want to attach it to the church, because the church was also the schoolhouse, and be a little bit morbid to attach a graveyard to your schoolhouse. So they kind of put it in a spot a little bit off from out of town. And so the cemetery itself was not actually consecrated as a cemetery until February of 1882. So it's kind of the same situation whenever you have the land. If it's a community cemetery, a lot of the time that would be it would be considered consecrated ground when they go to set the cemetery up or the graveyard. So it's not always having to be attached to a church. It just depends on what they do. And it's interesting, in my area, there are, even though some of these cemeteries are not graveyards, you do have some churches that do take care of the property just off. Even though it might be a mile or so away, you do have some churches that do take care of specific cemeteries, even though it's not a graveyard. But that is a good point. Let's see here. D. Hoot says, I think that the name translates to Dragon Ranger. I believe she's talking about our friend on here that made the comment. I think it does. I didn't want to butcher it. And I'm actually getting over a bad migraine that I had last week. So if I seem a little bit spacey, I'm still getting over this really weird migraine that I had that caused me to lose my vision and lose my have word loss last week. It was actually a pretty bad migraine. And so I'm still kind of getting over that. And like I said, I didn't want to butcher the name, but thank you, D. Hoot. I appreciate that. Let's see. Nancy says that it could be because of a water table. Could very well be. Never know. And what she's talking about is Bob's question earlier about why they would put cemeteries or graveyards there on a hill. Hello to Miss Dee Dee, the dream interpreter. Thank you so much for joining us. And let's see. Nancy says, could you show your rods? Don't yours have a cover handles on them? I actually have multiple rods. I'm trying to think if I've got mine within distance here. I actually have multiple pairs. Whoops. Let's see here. They are not actually. Let me just see right quick. Hold 1 second. Let me grab them right here. Got them. Okay, so there's a lot of different kinds of rods. I don't have, there's some that have ornate handles. I actually have a pair that does have ornate handles. I do not have those close by, but I just like to use, just the simple kind. These do have, and maybe this is what you're talking about, Nancy. These do have the metal sheath right here. As you can see, this sheath just kind of free floats. And when it's in your hand, it just free floats. The pair that I have that's got some ornate handles to it are more like a, they kind of make me think of like an antenna that they retract into the really nice handle. You pull them all the way out like a little wand. They bend. They have a bend on them, and you can pull them out as far as you like, or as low as you want. But they do not. They do free spin, but they're not like floating in a handle. And so that's why I don't like those as well, because it just seems like they're on a hinge and they just turn. These, I feel like, are a little bit harder, nearly impossible to control. So that's why I like those, because you are literally just holding on to this sheath. They are copper. You can get them made out of multiple things. There's some glow-in-the-dark ones. I want to get a pair of the glow-in-the-dark. I have used those, but I like to stick straight to the copper. And even though the glow-in-the-dark, they are not copper, they're really good for visual, for showing after dark. I was going to get a pair just for this season to use. I'm kind of a purist when it comes to this sort of thing, but maybe for after dark investigations, that might be a good thing to get. But yeah, so these I actually went in, you can sort of see I've coated the end of them with glow-in-the-dark paint, and it was so dark last night, and we've had a lot of rain and cloudy skies lately. It didn't, even though they were glowing, it wasn't enough to show up on the live. It's one of those things where even like it was so bright up on the cemetery last night with the beaver moon, I was able to see without using a flashlight. But obviously when you're using a phone, that stuff doesn't really seem to translate very well. So let me go back here, but yes, thank you for mentioning that, Nancy. Yeah. Thank you, Dee Dee. Definitely have been trying to do that all week this week. And that's actually another reason why I waited an extra day on that, on doing that live. All right. So D Hoop brings up a good point. She says, did any of the Ovilus names match? So I'm going to pull up, give me 1 second. I'm going to pull up the roster. I'm not going to show that, but we were getting names from several different places during the live last night. Laura, who is on here, who commented a few minutes ago, she mentioned the name Mary or Marilyn, and actually she said Marilyn or possibly Mary. Right in front of us was a lady whose name was Mary. I did a search on the roster here. We also got Jack. There were no Jacks inside the roster. However, if you go and you look up Jack, I think Jill brought this up last night in the comments section, that Jack is short for John. There were quite a few Johns inside of the cemetery there, but whenever I went through and looked at the roster here, there was I'm not going to say the last name, a John Senior, and it just so happened that that he had a wife named Mary, and then we also found someone named Berlin. So we didn't know if Berlin or Marilyn could be what she was picking up on. It just so happens that Berlin, who was in the row directly behind us in that little cluster of stones that we were standing at with the tripwire. So John, Mary, and Berlin were all part of the same family, and those were some of the names there that we got. Now, like I said, we didn't find an actual Jack. Possibly could be someone. John, not really sure. I did also find a Marilyn that was an infant buried in the new section, and she died of pneumonia, and it was due to being a premature twin. So that name did match up. There was, let's see, we got the name Roger. Let me check right here. There is no Roger. Now, who knows? That could have been somebody, either it could have been a name, or that could have been somebody saying it as in yes or affirmative. Not really sure. Also, Walter. We got the name Walter. And there was no Walter inside of there. We did in the very beginning get an affirmative response to in that. So again, if you're standing there where we were standing, I had a flashlight that was so far off there to the right, that was probably the furthest flashlight away, lit up in a positive response when we were talking about asking if someone was in the military, if they were either a revolutionary soldier or someone who was a patriot of the War of 1812. And instantly we got the flashlight lit up for that. And down there from those stones was a military stone of someone that was there during the Revolutionary War. And I'm looking here too to see if there was information. There is information on this about a Revolutionary War veteran. So it was really hard to determine who the first person buried inside of this cemetery was, because the stone, the earliest stone that has engravings on it, was 1838, and all it had were the letters SH with that year on it. And there was also a stone. They didn't put the full names on these. They just had initials. There was another from 1853 that had the initials EB on it. But one that they were able to identify was it's actually the first identifiable stone that's in this cemetery. First name was James, and he is one of 15 Revolutionary War veterans who moved to the county after the war, and he is the first one that was identifiable here inside the cemetery. And so I believe he died in 1848 at the age of 89. So, and it was one of those silhouette style stones, but he also had a military marker as a footstone to go along with the silhouette stone. So that was over in that area. I don't know if that could have been it, but we will see. Let's see. I'm going to look back and see if there were any other names that maybe matched up. So I am still doing some looking because, again, we did the investigation last night. So I've not had time to go back and completely review all of the video as well as all of my notes because I had to work today. But we will go back and definitely check some of that. But I did try to find some specific information since we knew we were doing this live tonight. Let's see. Bob says, is there a process to bless the rods like bathe in rainwater or moonlight, etc.? Yeah, people do different things. So I actually have 3 different sets that I use on all of my tours because when I do my rugby tour down to the cemetery and I show people how to use the rods to find the unmarked graves, they're able, if they don't bring their own, they are able to use the rods. And so when you got multiple people using these, you get a lot of different energy on there. And I've had sold out tours of 10 to 12 people on them, everyone using the rods. By the time the last people get to using them, sometimes they seem to be a little bit wonky. And so I have some different processes that I do, but yes, some people do. A lot of people do cleanse their rods, especially with moonlight, and then also especially when it's full moon. And there are some different processes that people can do with that. The glow in the dark ones, they are cool. I have used them. They're weighted a little different. It's almost like they're very, very smooth. These are fairly smooth. I mean, for rods that are bent copper rods, but I don't know if it's like some kind of bearing or something that's in them, but they're heavier and they do seem to, I don't know, like I said, I think they're neat for demonstration purposes, but I tend to like these, and I tend to like those a little more than the ones that are just made out of coat hangers. But yeah, they're pretty cool. They're kind of expensive, but they're definitely pretty cool. Let's see. And I will look back and see if there's any other names, because I do need to pull the log, because when we started doing the dowsing rods, I put the rods in my pocket, or excuse me, not the rods, put the ovilus in my pocket, and they seem to all of a sudden just go off spitting off tons of words. So I do need to go back and see on that. As far as a judge, let me just look here. There were no judges that I could find on here, although I did find that there was a justice of the peace that is buried in there. It was a former military man, and he went on to be a justice of the peace. That is a good question, because we did get judge come up. We also got the word monument right after that. which is kind of telling. And some of the responses that we did get inside of the cemetery, especially in the beginning, as soon as we turned the obelisk on, we did get responses that was basically talking about us being quiet, telling us not to disturb. And I can go ahead and I can pull that video up, but I feel like it would just be easier rather than going through and trying to find everything, just kind of talking through it. We may pull up here in a few minutes, but we did get judge at that point. Like I said, the closest thing I could find to that at this point was a justice of the peace that was in there. D Hoot says, anything on the train derailment, folks who might have been buried there or miners? Good question. So I do have information on the specific train wreck that I was talking about. There were, from the information that I could find, there were 4 different train wrecks within the county between 1915 and 1931. And so for some reason, I was thinking that this train wreck took place sometime between 1900 and 1910. This specific one, Jill was correct when she brought this up. This particular train wreck did take place in 1915, and it was one that occurred when a 50-foot trestle over the creek there failed while the train was crossing. And so I am going to pull up. I did find a picture of that. So bear with me one second as I pull that up. Here we go. So there was a picture of the train derailment that took place. This took place only a few miles from where the cemetery currently is. And from the information that I found, there was one person that was killed during the train derailment. And so that was, I could not find, looking through the information here, I could not find the specific name of the person that was killed, but let me, the failure of the wooden trestle caused engine number 24 and caboose number 201 to plunge into the creek, killing one person and injuring 4 others. So I'm going to look into that a little bit further, see if I can find a little more information to see if I can see maybe who, if I can find a name of specifically who was killed. Actually, again, when we go back to that cemetery, we'll ask some more specific questions now that we know that there was one person that was killed on that. So great question there. Let's see. I see people mentioning the train derailment. Let's see. Laura says it was really active, not very successful investigation. I felt like it was, for sure, because again, when you do these lives, you never know if they're going to be active or not. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed that I don't really always get to do on the investigation, or don't really get to spend as much time doing, was doing the thermal gun. So let me just, let's see. I'm going to pull up the video. I just downloaded it as we were on the live here. So let me, whoops. We don't need any sound for that. Let me just sort of, ooh, that's a close-up shot. Okay. So yeah, so we pulled up the thermal, and we'll just kind of wait till we pull this. So I thought this was really neat. It was a really neat view of the cemetery there. And of course, you could see what it looked like during the day from the video I showed you earlier, as well as from the thermal there. And who knew stones took on just so much heat and so much energy from the sun. Now, the sun had only been set at this point. We did the live at 7 p.m. So the sun had really only been set from, I believe it started to set around 5:30, 5:45. Who knows with this new time change? It's way too early. But the sun had already at this point been set for probably about 2.5 hours. So it's interesting to see just how much the trees, you can see the trees in the background far back there. You can see the mountains, and then you can also see the ground and see just how much of a heat signature these stones have taken on, which is pretty wild. I was hoping we would see some type of movement or some type of entity manifest, or even just kind of something unexplained move around the stones there, but we didn't. Those little stones right there, those would have been the infant stones. There was a high number of infants in this cemetery, which is just really sad. But again, you can see from all the blank spaces that are there, where there are no stones, but there are unmarked graves in those areas. So all right, so while that's playing, I'm gonna kind of scroll through here, but it really was an active investigation. I really enjoyed it because we kind of had to investigate a little bit differently as far as the live goes. I'd mentioned earlier not having ambient lighting. We had to rely a lot on light up or alarming type tools, and we really didn't even use a lot of alarming tools because there were homes at the base of the mountain, and probably heard some dogs barking during this. I felt like I took my REM pod, but I felt like I didn't want to sit it out because I was worried that the REM pod might go off and cause it to draw a little bit more attention to us being up there. So, we had to do things just a little bit different. I want to go back and maybe use the spirit box and see if we get anything specific for that. I was kind of going back and forth between the Ovilus and the spirit box. I was going to use them both. I'm always going to have my Ovilus with me because I'm thoroughly impressed with what that comes back with a lot of the time. And it just didn't disappoint on past investigations, and it definitely didn't disappoint last night either. So again, trying to use things that were a little bit quieter. We talked very quiet during this investigation, and that actually showed in the very beginning as soon as we turned the Ovilus on with the words that it spit out to us, which was basically telling us not to disturb and telling us to be quiet. Let's see. Just looking back at the comments here. This is true. The guy that does sell the tripwires, he is the one that I'm aware of that sells dowsing rods. And I love my tripwire. Interesting fact about the tripwire, not a single blip last night. We had 2 two of the 36 feet tripwires set out. Not a single, not even one blip on that. Let's see. Dee Dee, I'll send you a link to his site because he does a good job with the tripwire as well as with the dowsing rods. Nancy says, I like when you ask if they can go back in time and the rod's pointed to the back of you. That is interesting that it did that. I didn't feel as though, and I'm not going to lie, it got kind of cold as soon as the sun set. We had an unusually warm day yesterday. It was in the 70s. We've had kind of up and down weather the last little bit. So it was in the 70s yesterday, and which was good. I think it was about 51 at the time that we were up here investigating. So temperature dropped pretty quick, and I was getting cold as I was using those rods. And so it just seemed like the longer we went, I don't know if it was the energy. I don't know if it was where I was getting over that migraine. I don't know. But my hands kept kind of wanting to lock up when I was using those rods. But it is interesting whenever we ask if they could go back in time. The rods did completely do just a flip back, and they actually stayed there for a few minutes and then moved back forward, which was pretty cool. You guys asked some great questions throughout the entire live, and I love that because you all were essentially going in cold. You didn't know anything about this location, but you asked some really good questions, and some of you that are intuitive actually really picked up on some pretty cool things. And Laura says, without saying much, didn't the obelisk say creek? It did. When we walked back to the tripwire so I had two tripwires set up. I had that one that you see on the screen in front of you. You cannot see it. It's amazing how far these phones will not pick up, especially in the dark. But if you look, you cannot see it, but probably, I don't know, I would say probably 50 yards ahead, 50 feet ahead, there was a tripwire stretched out long ways. And so I went down there, and that was where I got the word creek on that. Let's see here. Hello, Kim. Thank you so much for tuning in. Glad you're here. Okay, Dee Dee says, unmarked because no one knew who they were, or other reasons do we think? The city I live in, the founder is in an unmarked grave, beachside. He was drunk. Huh. Well, that's fascinating. So there's several reasons that these graves would be unmarked. One of the reasons is because they call them unmarked. Well, some of the stones are not etched. Some of the stones are not etched. The other reason would be because they were originally marked. They were doing some cleaning up of the cemetery. Some of the trees were cut down, damaged some of the field stones, or damaged some of the different stones. And when they cleaned up the trees the tree damage that happened, they just kind of set the stones in some of the areas. So even though some of them are marked, they're not marked in the right spot, if that makes sense. So I'd like to go back and work with the rods and see about marking some of those to see if we can see. So some could be because of status, and they didn't have a stone actually made. They were probably never marked, and some would be through damage. But that is a great question. Angela says, I've not seen anything like that with a thermal. I honestly haven't either. And maybe it has something to do with the type of stones. One thing I should have done, and I will do this, I want to go back and go into the new area. I call it new. It's from the early 1900s, but there are some current graves. I think there was a grave that was up there. There might be a 2025, but I think some of the others are from 20. I mean, from 2020 at least. I'm interested to see if those stones hold the heat like those other stones that we were just looking at. So, but I hadn't seen anything like that as well. Let's see. Hello, James. Welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in. D Hoot says the thermal showed temps up and down from 47 to 42 degrees. It did. And so the person, and just kind of looking at the screen here, the person with that light actually was lighting up a lot. Now, a couple of these lights here that you're looking at the screen, a couple of those are lights from over the mountain. But some of those, there are a few over there that were flashlights. I do want to add that. Okay, let's see. Okay, that was funny. Dee Dee made mention of asking somebody to throw a rock or to send a breeze through. And of course, my friend Dr. Sumner, she definitely did not like the thought of somebody throwing a rock. It was really kind of funny. So obviously she's from Florida, being here in Tennessee. Now, we do have rules of being in cemeteries after dark or graveyards after dark. It's not as big of an issue here because we have so many cemeteries and there's really no way to close them off here. But it was kind of funny when we got up here to this cemetery. Dr. Sumner said this is actually only the second time that she had been in a cemetery after dark. The other time was when she was helping me film the intro for my show Ghost Biker Explorations that we use whenever the show comes on there. But that was only her second time being in a cemetery, first time being in there investigating. So she's not one that typically has a lot of luck or investigates. She definitely doesn't investigate cemeteries or graveyards after dark. But like I said, for me, that's always been kind of a common thing. I like being in a cemetery after dark. It's actually very peaceful. Yeah, it is funny. She does get a little spooked at times. Let's see. Angela says, but I do want to jump back. That was a good thing to ask them to do. And unfortunately, we did not have anything throw a rock, or it was a breezy day, but it turned out to not really be a breezy night. Things kind of shut down and calmed down after dark. Now, Angela says, does the church keep records as to who is buried there or court records? There are records. I have been looking at this roster and looking at the roster here. Like I said, it does have the names. This would be from the Historical Society, and some of this would come from church or other burial records. Like it does have some of the different names. Like for instance, one of the first burials there, it says SH, and so it has NA, which would be the birth year, and 1838 would be the death year. And so it's a pretty extensive list of almost all of the. I'm finding conflicting records. Find a Grave has approximately 175. This that I'm looking at says that it is the final resting place for more than 150 of this particular community or town's residents. So yeah. But to answer your question, yeah, there are definitely some definitely records on this particular cemetery, and I forget the number of. Okay, so that kind of caught my attention when we were looking at this. Yes, so again, it's kind of hard to tell some of the different people who would be buried in there. And some of this also goes back to the records, so where the initials are, and then some of the specific records from different families saying that they were buried. Like one of the things that I found when I was doing research, let me see if I can pull this up here, was a farmer. And I'm looking to see if I have where I wrote that, where I typed that up here. So there was a soldier who later became a farmer, and he died from complications where there was a flood. So there's a river that's not too far from the cemetery. Again, we're up on a mountain here, but down in the valley is a river, and it's a pretty prominent river for the area. And so it did flood, and one of the farmers in there, he was 87 years old, and it said that he actually died of complications from trying to save some of his livestock from the barn there, and tried to save them from the flood, and he had some complications. He ended up dying, and he's buried in the cemetery here. Now, it couldn't direct me to the stone specifically, but based on family records, it said that he is buried in there, but he is in one of those unmarked graves without a stone. So I don't know if it was one that had a stone at one point in time, or if it was one that maybe was a field stone. I'm not exactly sure, but kind of an interesting story. It'd be really cool to find that. Maybe if we dug into some of that specific family records, might be able to locate at least what part of the cemetery he would be in, based on some of his family that's buried in there as well. But that was kind of an interesting story that I found, and I was looking to find the specifics, but I am not seeing that at a glance. I did run across that this morning, and I believe, I'm trying to remember, I think that it was when I was looking up the names, it was John's dad or John's grandpa. It would have been in the 1800s when this would have happened. Let's see. Bob says, did you take any photos at night in the cemetery? I did take some photos in there. I specifically did not catch anything of interest last night on that, but I'm going to go back and do a little more looking and see. I do want to look here. So I think I'm going to play the audio here. I think this is right around the time that we saw the meteorite. And that was just, I don't think I caught it because, as you could see from the daylight videos, we're kind of surrounded by trees, even though the top of the cemetery was open. And then, of course, right now, we've got a lot of leaves that have come down because we are in the kind of the waning part of fall, where the leaves are almost all down, but there's still a lot around the tops of the cemeteries here. But I'm going to see if this is near where we saw the meteor.
Take care of certain parts of the cemetery. Dee Dee heard ringing. Okay, that's wild.
Okay, that's wild, Dee Dee, because when we were setting up, did it sound like a ting, 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 ting bell? Because when we were setting up, I heard that ringing too, almost weirdly enough, like a dead bell.
Look down there. When you said ringing, that one lit up. What is that?
Meteor! Oh my God, that was so cool! That was the coolest meteor! Oh man!
Okay, let's.
Oh my God,
I'm going to go back
one of the
just
best.
a little bit. You can kind of see it at the top of the screen up there. So the flashlight lights up to the left. It's there in the center, and it lights up to the left when she's talking about the ringing. But up at the very top of the
PDI box
screen
had a a hot.
God, that was so cool. Because when we were setting up, I heard that ringing too, almost weirdly enough, like a dead bell.
Look down there. When you said ringing, that one lit up. What is that?
Meteor! Oh my God, that was so cool!
right at the
That was the coolest meteor!
center top of the screen.
Oh my God, they're one of the best I've ever seen.
That was cool. I don't know that I got the camera held up high.
Make-A-Wish?
Yeah. Okay, that
was beautiful.
it was blue.
Oh, and blue, purple, green. That was awesome. Yeah, let's watch the stars for a minute.
Now,
there's the moon again. Sorry, that was freaking awesome.
Beautiful.
I tried to pull the camera up. We are
So I'm trying to look, it was right after, of course, while the meteor cut across the cat ball back in behind us on the infant's grave lit up. And then it seemed like there was 2 other times, maybe 3 other times, but at least 2, when we were talking about the meteor. There it is. Let's see.
God, they're one of the best I've ever seen.
Let's see here.
So cool. I've never seen one like that. It was like close. Okay. Now to collect myself. That's probably one of the coolest things. Oh, the cat ball.
So
all right.
I'm pretty sure twice more when we were talking about the meteor, that cat ball was lighting up. And then, of course, we did have a flashlight on a stone way back that lit up only a couple times. And it was only when we were directly communicating with it, which was pretty neat. But I will go back and look and see if we did get anything. Nothing stood out just at a quick first glance on those photos. But I will do a deeper look just to make sure. as I know sometimes there's things we don't see in the moment. I'm trying to think anything else. Let me just sort of, let's see what was going on here with that.
Did I interrupt your silence?
Okay. This was when we turned the ovilus on. So let me just kind of.
Actually, so you've got 2 on these infant stones.
Yeah. 1, 2.
That was different ones that was lighting up.
Did anybody else see the shooting star?
Did anyone here die of the flu epidemic?
Now, I do
There's a
know
flu epidemic here in this area.
I do know that
Did
there were
you or anyone you know
2 people that
die
died.
during the flu epidemic in the early I believe it was the 1930s, I think. Okay, I'm going to turn this ovilus on.
I thought this was kind of interesting when we turned it on.
Interrupt and wrong. Did I interrupt you? If I interrupted you, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt your silence? Or was I wrong about the year of the flu epidemic? Yes, there was. Okay, Jill says there was a flu epidemic in 17 and 18. That's not the one that there may have been one at that time. That's a good point. I know that there was someone that died of flu here in this area in the 30s. There's a rash of flu. Did anyone here die in the flu epidemic of 1970? Noise and please.
Is it? Could be a deer, but something just moved back there.
I thought that was
Okay, so far this has said interrupt, wrong, noise, and please.
I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting line of responses for, one, the fact we were wanting to be extra quiet as well as just being in a cemetery, I don't know if we interrupted someone or if we maybe weren't supposed to be asking questions. I don't know. It was kind of interesting that each one of those responses kind of led down that same track. Let's see here. Like I said, I need to pull off the word bank and look at some of those words that we got. As D Hoot says, the ovilus took off when you put it in your pants pocket near your knee. Yeah, and I'm not really sure why that was. I mean, it was very, very chatty. And I should have just pulled it out and let it continue to speak. Excuse me. But it was cycling through the words before I could get to it. So we definitely need to pull that out, check that out. Again, a couple interesting responses, intelligent responses with the flashlights. No hits on the tripwire. A few interesting responses on the dowsing rods. That's where I'm just kind of skipping through here. Let's see what we got. Let me pull this up.
Helpful, tied, and death. Interesting.
Okay. I definitely see him in this one.
All right. Okay. The obelisk is going on.
You can hear it talking.
All right. Now, where you from? Let's see. Did you find? I'm gonna ask a couple questions that we already asked with this. So let me.
See, it's still talking.
Might as well see what it's saying now.
Going crazy.
Idle mind sold.
House, mountain.
Shove. Strong.
Huh.
All right. Man, there's something walking over there.
Something walking.
Yeah. It just took like 4 or 5 steps.
Yeah, that was the point we started hearing walking.
There's definitely
We started
something walking
hearing
over there.
coyotes. Ovilus is still talking.
Walk.
And it's kind of
Obelisk
wild.
said walk.
Something. It sounded like something walking. Oh, sorry. My bad. I'm connected. My bad.
It could probably be disconnected.
Okay. All right. Focus now. Here we go.
All right. All right. So I'm gonna ask a couple questions here.
Ovilus is still talking.
Let's say crash. Property.
Okay, so here's the deal for those who are watching. I'm holding the camera and the light, so I'm not going to be able to pull up any questions.
So just kind of muting that now. Like I said, it was still going, continuing to talk. I really should have pulled that list before we got on here, because yeah. And you can see the EMF detector there on it, just going absolutely crazy. Sometimes, that said Walter, sometimes we don't even usually get any hits on the obelisk. So, so kind of interesting. So, and because we didn't get a whole lot of other hits there, or hits on the dowsing rods, I'm actually going to go ahead and stop that. Let's see. Bob says you were talking about slaves earlier as far as sold goes. Yes. So, so I don't have any records. The information that I was looking at, the roster there, I don't have anything that indicates any slave information on that. Now, that's not to say that there weren't slaves in there. Typically, slaves would have been buried kind of off from anyone else, but a lot of them did use filled stones. But that's not always a good indicator for here, because sometimes those filled stones are just people who couldn't afford anything, any type of elaborate etched stone. And again, there are a lot of filled stones up in that cemetery. So I'm not saying there aren't, but that's definitely something. I mean, the lights seem to indicate that there may have been somebody in there. It actually hit pretty positive on that. So, Bob, we will definitely go and look into that a little bit further. Gotcha. And then I see what you're saying here. And he said sold was on the obelisk. I mean, that's a very, very good possibility. So I will look into that a little bit more and see if we can find any specific information. I do know, so in this area, there were slaves. There weren't a whole lot, but there actually were slaves. And I know in one of the larger cities, again, larger cities in the county, there were some slaves in there. There were some slaves inside of some of those cemeteries. And then in the south end of the county, there were some black cemeteries. I don't think that any of those were slaves. I don't think. I believe that they were free blacks. But I will definitely look in and see what kind of information I can find on that, because the obelisk as well as the lights tend to indicate something a little bit different. Let's see, was there anything that I missed? That's just kind of a brief wrap up of the video. We were live for a little over 2.5 hours. The average live this season seems to be about 2 to 2.5 hours. So go back, see if we missed anything. Let me go ahead and remove this here from the stage there. There we go. So fun season. I think that was a great way to wrap the season up with talking about where it all ends with the cemetery. Again, a place that I definitely like to investigate, a place that we're definitely going to kind of dig in a little bit further and see if do some future investigations at. I think we'll go up there and see what we can dig up, so to speak. But any last minute questions over here, feel free to put those over here in the comments, and we're going to kind of wrap things up. We have a few Thursdays before the end of the year. Going to see about getting some interesting guests on coming up here. I don't know if we'll do any panels. We may try to throw in another live investigation before the end of the year. We'll just kind of have to see, but we're making some announcements on some guests and such. Thank you again to everyone that watched. It was definitely a successful season, and I appreciate your help in investigating. I appreciate your questions, your shares, your comments, your support. Definitely appreciated. Doing these lives are not always extremely easy, because you get the good, the bad, the ugly, the raw, the technical difficulties. You get all of that whenever we do these lives, but we really enjoy them. You seem to enjoy them by helping us out. And it's always fun to experience all of this together. So we'll definitely try to do some more lives throughout the year leading up to season 9. Got some interesting ideas. Actually going to be filming for a live, filming for an investigation that we'll be highlighting next year. Not going to be a live, but it will be a produced episode. So going to be traveling next week, filming for that. So yeah, definitely some, oops, got a lot of comments coming in here. Definitely some great places. Let's see here. Thanks, James. We definitely appreciate that. I do really enjoy the live shows. Sometimes, it's kind of a trade-off. I love doing the produced episodes because I can really dig in and do a deep investigation, but I love the interaction of the live shows. So even though that has always sort of been stepping out of my comfort zone because it doesn't allow for any forgiveness when it comes to technical difficulties and issues and such, but it's real and it's raw, and to me, I really, really like that, and I feel like doing these investigations together really helps bring out activity that we might not get whenever it's just me and another person or me investigating by myself. So there's definitely, the lives are definitely special to me, and I really, really enjoy doing those. So I don't know if all of season 9 will be 100% live. We may kind of do a mixture of produced episodes as well as lives, but I can guarantee we will be having more live shows throughout the year next year. So that definitely will be coming up. Greg says, sorry I'm late. How are your Fridays? Hey, Greg, it's always good to see you. Greg is a dear friend, known Greg for a while. Always glad to see you on here. My Fridays, it all depends. Typically, Friday evenings, we have investigations or we have tours that are going on, but right now we're kind of at a little bit of a lull with October, but that will pick up probably going into the new year. So right now my Fridays are open, but sometimes I don't know until 4 o'clock the day of. As Dee Dee says, lives are never easy. They're really not. There's a little bit of stress that comes with them because obviously you want it to be an active investigation and you want it to be a exciting location, but sometimes it's not, and that's okay too. You just have to accept that it may be a quiet night and that it might not be, because at least with the produced episodes, you can go through all of your evidence and you can pull that out. Sometimes that makes it seem a little more exciting than what it is, just because, you're rolling an 8-hour, 12-hour investigation into a 30-minute block of video. So sometimes that's a little bit makes things seem a little bit different than what they are. And so, but they're not always that easy, especially setting up, and you have to be able to turn and pivot in the blink of an eye, because moving things around and resetting up is always a challenge. But with my busy schedule, it actually works out really well. It works out well as far as putting the episodes and such together. Sometimes it's because you go there, you get what you get, and then you do a little bit of extra investigating to put out at a later time. So you have some behind the scenes footage, but otherwise you get what you get. But the trade-off is sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to travel for the investigations on a weekly basis, especially during the busiest of months. And October, as you guys know, because a lot of you are investigators or a lot of you travel to conventions and such, October is just insanity when it comes to time working day shift and night shift at the jail and at Historic Rugby. There's a lot to it, and then putting out the traveling for the live investigation. So this season I was a little bit closer to home, which was really, really nice. Great question, Angela. She says, did Tiffany ever go back for the baptism? She actually did. We talked about this yesterday. So Tiffany did go to the river on Sunday, like she had said. She was there for, I think she was there for probably about an hour, because, she was telling me she did not want to show up and nothing, say she was going to be there and nothing, or she didn't want to say she was going to be there and then not show up. But she said she was there. Now, unfortunately, it was a cold, rainy Sunday. So that may have played into it. I don't know, but she said nothing happened when she went, but she did show up. She did what she said she was going to do. And thank you for remembering that, Angela. I'll definitely let her know that you asked. And thank you, Greg. Missed you as well. Let's see. D Hoot says, I'd rather see it live than edited. Yeah, I'm the same way, because you can always go back, and experiencing that live moment together is something that is really unique. And then you can always go back and look and see if there's something you missed. So absolutely, I'm with you there. Bob says, I wish to congratulate you on an excellent season. Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much. Very entertained. And now I can walk so well. It is nice to ride along with you on your live investigations. Thank you. And I hate that you're unable to walk and get out and do the investigating as well. But I always look forward to interacting with you guys on here. And I always love that. Let's see. Absolutely. I would love it, Greg. Reach out to me, and I can definitely do that. So I know, like I said, right now, November is usually a little bit quieter. Of course, we have bookings open up until 4 p.m. the day of, but that's typically for our walks and such. So 9 Central, which would be 10 Eastern, that should not be a problem. As long as we don't have an investigation, that would be great. And absolutely, I can't say enough about my co-investigators. I tend to like to keep my people small when it comes to investigating. And I'm talking about the people who are actually on site and on location with me. I like to limit it. And, there's been a couple lives where we've had more people than anticipated, just because I'm inside their location, and it's a little bit harder to regulate that whenever you're inside someone's store or what have you. But being able to investigate with Dr. Sumner as well as Tiffany is something that I absolutely love. And so I'm glad anytime that they're able to come along with me on an investigation. It definitely adds to it, adds to the experience, and then being able to interact with you guys who are really my co-investigators on this definitely adds to the experience. There's even though I'm alone inside the location, I don't feel alone when I have everybody with me. And you're able to really bounce that energy off, bounce those ideas, and also kind of distribute that energy a lot better. So I'll definitely get in touch with you, Greg. And yeah, definitely good on her for showing up. Tiffany is one when she says she's going to do something, as long as she's not sick, she does what she says she's going to do. And she says, I agree. Good to see Chris and Tiffany. People bring different energies. And we try to test that on some of these investigations. Going in, if I have the opportunity, I love places that I can go to more than once, because I don't feel like you get a real true experience of the location when you just go there one time. And so I love when I can go multiple times and when I can take different people to the locations, because it always seems like, depending on who you take with you, that's why I can't stress enough how important it is to know your team and choose the right team that you're going to surround yourself with. And so it definitely does bring different energies whenever you have different people. So it's always interesting to go to a location and investigate with Chris versus going to a location and investigating with Tiffany. And there's been a couple episodes where I've actually had the opportunity to investigate with both, which has always been a lot of fun. And Bob says Tiffany was a hoot and always loved seeing Chris. Absolutely. I will definitely pass that information along to all of them. And you're definitely welcome, Greg. Definitely. Well, everyone, we're approaching the 11 o'clock hour. I always wonder when I don't have a guest host to sit and bounce the conversation off. I always sit and wonder, am I going to be able to make it through an hour? And guess what? Every time we tend to exceed that and have a great show. So thank you guys for helping to make this a great show, and more importantly, helping to make this a great season. Again, be on the lookout for different episode announcements of people that guest announcements that we'll be having on the show, as well as future lives that will be coming up. I'll try to, sometimes I don't decide till the last minute, but I will try to get the word out when we're doing a live investigation. I will try to get that word out a little bit earlier so that you guys can plan. But as far as everything goes, we should be having shows every Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, getting back on that Ghost Biker Garage schedule. And so I do have a couple different podcast appearances that I will be making here leading up to Christmas time. So I will be announcing those as well. But yeah, I just, again, can't thank everyone enough. But with that all being said, we will be ending the season out on a strong note, I think. Please, if you're looking to kill some time, go back, check out some of the episodes, and send me your timestamps, because you may catch something that we either didn't catch while we were there live, or that has not been caught yet on the playback. So everybody, I hope that you have a good night, a great weekend, and look forward to seeing you all next week. So until then, be safe and take care, everyone. Good night.